A C-123 provider flies low. It is a beast of an aircraft. It lumbers over the green canopy. Below is a world of triple canopy jungle, a world of rivers, a world of villages, a world of life. From the plane's wings, a fine mist begins to fall. It is not rain. This mist clings to the leaves. It settles on the water. It drifts into the homes of farmers. It coats the skin of children playing below. They look up, curious. They do not know this mist is a weapon. They do not know it will change their world forever. They do not know it will haunt their families for generations. This was Agent Orange. It was a chemical. It was a defoliant. But it was much more than weed killer. It was a tool of war, deployed on a massive scale by the United States military during the Vietnam War. Its purpose was simple: deny the enemy cover, destroy their food supply. But its legacy is complex. It is a story of unintended consequences, a story of suffering that did not end when the war did, a story written in the DNA of millions of people. The story of Agent Orange begins long before Vietnam. It starts in the laboratories of World War II. Scientists were searching for new weapons. They explored chemical compounds to destroy enemy crops. One such compound was 2,4,5-T, or 2,4,5-T. It was a powerful herbicide that could kill broadleaf plants with incredible efficiency. By the 1940s, the United States military had weaponized it. They saw its potential, not just for killing weeds, but for reshaping battlefields. They had created a powerful tool, stored and waiting for the right moment. The chemical itself was a mixture, a 50-50 blend of two herbicides, 2,4,5-T, 2,4-D, shipped in large steel barrels marked with a bright orange stripe. That stripe gave the mixture its name, Agent Orange. But there was a hidden ingredient, an unwanted passenger. During manufacture of 2,4,5-T, a toxic byproduct was created. It was called TCDD, a form of dioxin, not intended, a contaminant, one of the most toxic substances ever created. The decision to use it in war was gradual. It started small. In the late 1950s, the British used similar herbicides in the Malayan Emergency. U.S. military observers took note. They saw a way to fight a guerrilla war, a war without front lines, fought in dense jungles. By 1961, President John F. Kennedy authorized initial tests in South Vietnam. The goal: clear vegetation along roads and around bases. The logic was simple. If the enemy couldn't hide, they couldn't ambush. The chemical seemed an answer to the jungle. The companies that made Agent Orange knew about the dioxin, Dow Chemical, Monsanto. They knew it was dangerous. Internal documents later proved it. But the pressure to produce was immense. Safety protocols were rushed. Production was sped up. The spraying began in earnest in 1962. The program was codenamed Operation Ranch Hand. The United States Air Force crews who flew the missions adopted the sardonic motto, "Only you can prevent forests." Their targets were the dense jungles of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the mangrove forests of the Mekong Delta, the agricultural lands that fed the Viet Cong. From 1962 to 1971, the United States military sprayed nearly 20 million gallons of herbicides over South Vietnam. The vast majority of this, over 11 million gallons, was Agent Orange. It was a war against the very landscape of the country. The methods were brutally efficient. Low-flying C-123 provider aircraft equipped with special spray tanks flew in formation. They released thick clouds of defoliant over vast swathes of land. A single mission could destroy thousands of acres of forest in minutes. Helicopters and soldiers with backpack sprayers targeted smaller areas. They cleared the perimeters of fire bases. They destroyed rice paddies in areas deemed to be under enemy control. The spraying was not precise. The wind carried the mist for miles. It settled on everything and everyone. Military commanders saw it as a success. Reports came in of defoliated roadsides and exposed enemy bunkers. They believed they were saving American lives. By denying cover, they could reduce ambushes. By destroying crops, they hoped to starve the insurgency and drive peasants into government-controlled strategic hamlets. For a time, it seemed to work. The jungle withered and died. Vast areas of triple canopy forest were reduced to a desolate landscape of mud and dead trees. The green heart of Vietnam was turning brown. But the enemy adapted. They moved underground. They moved at night. Over 6 million acres of South Vietnam were sprayed. That is roughly the size of Massachusetts. At least 10% of the country's inland forests were destroyed. The mangrove forests that protected the coastlines were devastated. The program peaked from 1967 to 1969. Planes flew almost daily. The chemical rain was a constant feature of life. By the late 1960s, the world started to notice, scientists began to ask questions. They saw reports of dying forests, sick villagers. A 1967 petition from thousands of scientists urged President Johnson to halt the program. They warned of unknown ecological consequences. They worried about the long-term effects on human health. News reports started to trickle out. Journalists in Vietnam documented the dead landscapes. They interviewed farmers whose crops were ruined. The official narrative of a safe and effective military tool was beginning to crumble under the weight of independent observation. The turning point came from within the scientific community. In 1969, a study by the Bionetics Research Laboratories was leaked to the press. The study, commissioned by the National Cancer Institute, showed a link. It found that 2,4,5-T, a key ingredient in Agent Orange, caused birth defects in laboratory animals. This was explosive information. It confirmed the worst fears of critics. The herbicide was not just killing plants. It was a teratogen, a substance that could cause malformations in an embryo. The hidden poison, dioxin, was now directly linked to horrific health outcomes, at least in a lab setting. Public pressure mounted quickly. The anti-war movement seized on the issue. Agent Orange became a powerful symbol. It represented the amorality of the war. It showed a disregard for both human life and the environment. Newspaper articles and television reports brought the images of defoliated forests and stories of birth defects into American living rooms. The military could no longer control the story. The idea of spraying a chemical linked to birth defects over a civilian population was morally indefensible to a growing number of Americans. The political cost was becoming too high. The end came swiftly. In April 1970, the Department of Defense announced a temporary halt to the use of Agent Orange. The Bionetics study gave them the scientific justification they needed to act. While other herbicides continued to be used in a limited capacity, the orange-striped barrels were grounded. The last official ranch hand mission flew on January 7, 1971. The policy had changed. The planes were parked. The chemical war, at least the spraying part of it, was over. After the planes left, the poison remained. It lingered in the soil. It settled in the sediment of rivers. It settled in the sediment of lakes. It entered the food chain. Fish absorbed it from the water. Animals ate the contaminated plants. People ate the fish. People ate the animals. Dioxin is persistent. It does not break down easily. For the people of Vietnam, the exposure did not end in 1971. They continued to drink the water. They continued to farm the land. They were living in a contaminated world, a vast laboratory for the long-term effects of TCDD. The harvest of poison had just begun. A wave of sickness followed. In heavily sprayed areas, people reported a rise in cancers: liver cancer, lung cancer, soft tissue sarcoma. They suffered from skin diseases like chlorachin, painful rashes, and lesions that covered their bodies. But the most terrifying effects were passed on to the next generation. Women who were exposed to Agent Orange gave birth to children with a horrifying array of birth defects: spina bifida, anencephaly, cleft palates, extra fingers and toes, fused limbs. These children became the living legacy of the chemical war. American and Allied soldiers were not immune. They lived on bases where the barrels were stored. They drank water that was contaminated. They marched through areas that had just been sprayed. When they came home, many began to suffer from the same illnesses. They developed rare cancers. They had nerve disorders. They had skin conditions. They had respiratory problems. And like the Vietnamese, they watched in horror as their own children were born with birth defects at rates far above the norm. The Department of Veterans Affairs initially denied the connection. They told the soldiers it was all in their heads. For years, the U.S. government denied responsibility. The Department of Veterans Affairs refused to recognize the link between Agent Orange exposure and the diseases veterans were suffering from. It was a long, brutal fight for recognition. Veterans organized. They held protests. They shared their stories. They lobbied Congress. They compiled their own data. They fought a two-front war, one against their own failing bodies and another against the bureaucracy that refused to help them. It took until 1991 for Congress to finally pass the Agent Orange Act, forcing the VA to provide benefits for specific associated illnesses. The fight for corporate accountability was even harder. In 1979, a class action lawsuit was filed by veterans against the chemical companies, Dow Monsanto. The veterans argued the companies knew about the dioxin and should have warned the government. The companies denied everything. They claimed the science was uncertain. In 1984, just before the trial was set to begin, they settled out of court. They agreed to create a $180 million fund for the veterans. It sounded like a lot of money. But when divided among tens of thousands of claimants, the payments were small. It was a legal victory, but it felt like a hollow one. For the Vietnamese victims, there has been almost no justice. The U.S. government has consistently maintained that it has no legal obligation to compensate them. The argument is that the use of the herbicide was not a violation of the laws of war at the time. Several lawsuits filed by Vietnamese victims in U.S. courts have been dismissed. While the U.S. has provided some funding for environmental cleanup and health services in Vietnam, it is a tiny fraction of what is needed. The families caring for disabled children have received no direct compensation. They have been left to bear the burden alone. Dioxin hotspots still contaminate the land around former U.S. air bases, particularly at Da Nang and Bien Hoa. At these sites, the concentration of dioxin in the soil is thousands of times higher than safe levels. For decades, people lived on and around these sites, drawing water from contaminated wells, raising fish in poisoned ponds. Only in the last decade has a serious, U.S.-funded cleanup effort begun. It is a slow, expensive process. They are cleaning the soil, one shovelful at a time, trying to finally contain the poison that was unleashed so carelessly so long ago. The story of Agent Orange is not over. It did not end in 1971. It did not end with the lawsuits or the cleanup efforts. The poison still echoes. It echoes in the soil of Vietnam. It echoes in the genes of the third generation, the fourth generation, Vietnamese families, American families, who continue to be born with related health problems. It echoes in the halls of the VA as veterans continue to fight for recognition of new illnesses. The legacy of Agent Orange is a living history, a tragedy that continues to unfold in real time, a debt that has not been fully paid. This was more than a military tactic. It was a failure of imagination, a failure to consider the long-term consequences of our actions. The men who ordered the spraying saw only a tactical problem, a jungle that hid an enemy. They did not see the complex web of life they were destroying. They did not see the mothers who would weep over deformed infants. They did not see the soldiers who would die slow, painful deaths from cancer decades later. They saw a tool to win a war, and they were blind to the generational suffering it would cause. Remembering this story is a human responsibility. It is not about assigning blame. It is about acknowledging pain. It is about understanding the true cost of war, which is always paid long after the last shot is fired. The victims of Agent Orange on all sides deserve to be seen and heard. Their suffering must be part of the official record. Their story is a warning. It speaks to the terrifying power of the weapons we create and the moral obligation we have to control them. It forces us to ask what other poisons we are unleashing upon the world in the name of progress, in the name of security. The final takeaway is one of profound humility. We must remember the rain that fell from the sky. We must remember the forests that died, and the children who were born into a world of pain. The lesson of Agent Orange is simple and stark. When we wage war against nature, we are ultimately waging war against ourselves. The echoes of that war will always come back to haunt us, long after we have forgotten why we started fighting in the first place. The soil remembers, and it waits. And if we listen, it tells us how to heal.